Joining me now are Terri and Todd from Blond Viper, and I'm excited to talk to them about a project that they have, a new song called Represent. Terri and Todd, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
So, tell our audience a little bit about Blond Viper before we dive into what's going on now. How long has the band been together? How did it come to be with the members that it has? Paint us a picture, as they say.
Sure. Okay, so Todd and I have been working on projects together for a little over 19 years, mostly in television. But he's kind of the mastermind behind a lot of the things that we do. When COVID came along, it kind of put a kibosh on our TV producing. So he got out some old songs that he had made when he was with the AC/DC tribute band. He also did some, originals himself, and he he dug those songs back out during COVID and decided that he would just kind of tinker around with them. And then he calls me up one day and asks me, "Hey, you want to sing some background vocals on this song or on some of the songs that I'm working on?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" We didn't really have anything else to do. So that's sort of how it started, and how things always evolve from there. So it just started as one of his hairy brained ideas. And yeah.
Yeah, you want to hear my version?
Yes, exactly. And you know what they'll say? There's three sides to every story. So
Right.
the truth will be somewhere in between these two versions. But I'd like to hear Todd's version for
Yeah,
sure.
same thing. COVID struck. We had nothing to do. I dug out these old songs because I was in bands before I got into TV, and I did some recording on them, and I sent them to her, and I said, "What do you think?" And she said, "The vocals are terrible. Here, let me fix it."
Well, I wasn't going to tell him that part, but since you insist.
Yeah. Well, Todd, if she mentioned that you were part of an AC/DC tribute band, and a friend of mine used to produce a show here in LA out of the Whiskey, where every week it would be different tribute bands, and it can be really impressive how much the bands can look, but also just as important, sound. More important, really, sound like the bands. What were some of the most fun songs to be up there and being like, man, I can't believe I'm getting to play, Hell's Bells or whatever. Are there one or two that you're like, man, this never gets old?
Yeah, my absolute favorite was "Let There Be Rock"
Nice.
because the guitar player we had at the time was about the size of Angus Young. And I could easily throw him on my shoulders and we'd go walk around the crowd. He was doing a solo. That was my favorite part.
That sounds great. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. Yeah, for sure. And when we talk a little bit more about this project, I understand that some of the musicians that you work with are also parts of some different tribute bands, and I know that you've partnered up with Ron Keel to work on this. Now, is it specifically for Represent, which we'll talk about in a moment, or have you been working with Ron on Blond Viper throughout the process?
Well, we met Ron about 7 years ago on a different unrelated project. It really didn't have anything to do with music, but we worked with him back then. And so it kind of came to be that Eldon, our guitarist for Blond Viper, reached out to Ron to be a part of this project. And then once Ron got involved in it, he has this big passion for helping the local music scene in our area. So he was really, really interested in it. And when he learned more about it and he heard the finished product, he was very intrigued and he took it under his wing. So we're really lucky that we've had Ron support through all this.
Just for Represent so far. So because we've already released the other two albums that we recorded. So
Right. Yeah. And obviously he has, the whole RFK media. And every time that I talk to him every couple of years. I always try to get him to say that the F in RFK stands for what I think it does. But he never takes the bait.
I think it does too.
I think so too.
Yeah. I think everybody thinks it does. But
Yeah.
it's a nice little dance that we do. So you talk about sort of the local community there. So if you're near Ron, that tells me you're in South Dakota. Now, South Dakota is a place that I think a lot of people outside of that region don't really know. The only time I've ever been to South Dakota was when I moved out to LA from New York. I went out of my way because I wanted to go to, of course, Mount Rushmore, but also the Crazy Horse Memorial. So the part of South Dakota that you're in, is it nowhere near that, or about how far from maybe where some people have actually been, to take a trip there?
Yeah, we're as far away as possible to anything good.
Pretty much.
We have soybean fields and cornfields, and a tree or two, but that's
Opposite
about
end of the state.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah. Well, not to be too much of a nerd, but you sound like Luke Skywalker in the first Star Wars movie when he is trying to explain his home desert planet of
Right.
Tatooine. He's like, "Well, pick the center of the universe, and then when you get about as far away from it as you can, that's where you are." So
Right.
Pretty much.
I think that what I'm understanding is that your part of South Dakota is like the Tatooine of the United States if it snowed a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's all the more reason why it's great to have a community there. And obviously, even living in Los Angeles, tribute bands are huge. But when you live somewhere that, maybe not every major band has on their checklist, we're talking about AC/DC before, they're doing like, I don't know, 15 shows next year, and they're obviously they're hoping that people that live where you do are like, well, they could drive to Chicago or fly somewhere. So I would assume that that's really sort of, it really kind of fuels the excitement for tribute acts, because it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to get on a plane if I want to actually see AC/DC or Iron Maiden or whatever. So is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean,
Definitely.
there's some bigger venues in our area, but it's 99% country western bands and acts that come in, because of the South Dakota thing. But
Yeah,
but
sure.
just the nature of the beast. So
Right. And you had mentioned that Blond Viper have a couple of albums out. And why don't we talk about how this idea of Represent, which I will, our visual audience will get to see the video of the extended version. But even though I'm having you on the show and this is your song, I can't really play the song on YouTube because they're very tricky about like, well, you don't own this music. I'm like, yeah,
oh,
but
I know
they
they're
do.
awful.
Yeah. I was like, but look, I'm talking, it's their song. And they're like, no,
Yeah.
no, we don't care. So, but our audio audience will get to hear some, not all 9 minutes. I'm not going to lie, but they'll get to hear some. So talk about how Represent comes about.
Well, we were done with the first album, Crash, and Eldon, our guitar player, he had an idea to include maybe 3 or 4 local musicians to play guitar on a song. We didn't have the song written yet. Just as a way, because we're blessed, we're lucky that we can professionally record these things, and there's a lot of people in South Dakota that never have that chance. So I thought, well, that'd be cool. Let's give them a shot. And then it Eldon kept saying, "Oh, I should ask this guy," or "I forgot about this guy," and eventually got to we should ask Ron. And by the time it started, it was at least 2 years. We still haven't even recorded the song. He sent me some licks on the guitar, some riffs that I kind of cobbled together into a song, into about a 4-minute song. And then after he kept adding soloists and he kept adding other vocalists, we added another verse to sing and extended out the solo section to whatever it is now. What is there, 9?
6 vocalists, I believe, and then 12 guitarists.
Yeah.
And a harmonica and a drummer. That's probably about it. There's about a dozen, or about 20 people.
Basically, think of it this way: we started with the petri dish, and it grew into Godzilla. So
yeah, that's why it's like in Jurassic Park, just to reference another movie. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. But in this case, you should. You wanted the giant Godzilla, and our visual audience just saw when we had the moment where Ron Keel was there. I love it says on the screen Ron Keel parentheses, yes, the Ron Keel, which is very funny. So yeah, and I guess a part of it, according to the notes that I have, that there's 16 different guitar players, so that really adds up to some of the different parts. And as people watch the video, which I think is probably easily found on RFK Media, but I know Blond Viper, you also have a YouTube channel, so people can look for those. And it does make it easier that you can just type things into YouTube and find them. So what I like about the press release I got for this, and I'm sure you've both heard this whenever you talk to anybody, but I did like that, and I think that they're specifically speaking for the 9-minute version. It says right at the top, "Warning, please listen with caution while driving. You will bang your head on the steering wheel and thrust your fist through the roof while putting the pedal to the metal. The artist, record label, and their representatives assume no responsibility for reckless behavior included by this audio experience. And I was driving around to it a little earlier. I didn't damage my car. I didn't punch the roof or anything, but it was the 9-minute version is great for the amount of time I needed to get home from the supermarket earlier today.
There you
So
go.
yeah. So it's being explained that this is a digital single. So side A of the digital single is the epic 9-minute version, and then there is also a radio friendly version. So when you've got something that you've worked this hard, and you probably just, like your songs, it's like having kids or pets, you love the song, but then you have to decide, well, we got to cut some stuff out. Now there's a lot of solos, but how hard was it, Terri, to take 9 minutes and cut it down to, I think it's like 3.5?
Well, obviously it was very difficult. You never want to be unfair to anybody. It made the most sense, of course, to cut out the first part because it really didn't have anything to do with the actual body of the song. So that was the first thing to go, is, my part in the beginning, but I get it, Otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's really tough. You never want to cut anything, you never want to put anybody on the chopping block. It sucks, but it's also, you got to do what's best for the
Yeah,
song.
right. But at least there's still the extended version, so it's
Yeah.
not like, hey,
Yeah,
thanks
it's
for your
still
hard
there.
work, you're cut out of the song entirely, So,
I mean, anymore, people don't necessarily listen just on the radio. I mean, probably get more views and listens on our YouTube videos and stuff. So so it all works out.
yeah, no, but it's good because it's you're at least going to get played somewhere if there's the shorter version. I think getting 9 minutes on the radio isn't for everybody. And by radio is sort of a loose term, there's streaming services and all that, but I think it's true, everything works that way. And I think it's worth mentioning that this is to benefit the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. So how did helping that organization come about as part of this?
Well, Ron had that idea, which is
Okay.
a great idea. We knew that we wanted to donate the proceeds of the song somewhere. And, of course, there's a lot of very worthy organizations out there. This is just one, I think it really touched Ron's heart, and it's one that definitely everybody can agree on. So it seemed like a perfect fit.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard of them, but I think it's important to note that Tunnel to Towers, they provide mortgage-free homes to Gold Star and fallen first responder families, particularly with young children. And they build specially adapted smart homes for some of the more injured veterans and first responders. So, yeah, I think that organization does some tremendous work. Having grown up in the New York area, I know that they used to do a run from the tunnels to where the towers were. That was basically how it started, and it's really grown up out from that. So I think it's great. And you guys have had the song out there, and now what kind of feedback are you getting? Have you heard people who are like, I banged my head a little too hard and I bruised it on the steering wheel?
I don't think anybody's broke their neck yet, but we've definitely had a lot of really good feedback. Maybe a few headaches from headbanging, but I don't know.
That'd be great if you run into somebody and they're in one of those big puffy white neck braces and you're like, oh my God, what happened? Well, I listened to the song a little too loud. I had one of those Nigel Tufnell amps that go up to 11, and that was really a mistake. So I think that it's great that we've got the song, and you're spotlighting some of these, and the video version. What I love is it's like you have enough room to put it. You put down the musicians, and maybe for people who aren't from the area, they're gonna find out some of the projects that they've been involved with. And are you both from that area, or did you just end up in that part of South Dakota later in life, or have you been a part of this community for a long time?
Well, neither one of us were born in Sioux Falls. We kind of ended up there. Todd grew up in South Dakota, but I'm a Minnesota transplant. I'm in Southwest Minnesota, and he was in South Dakota. Yeah, South Dakota. That's a lot of different.
Let me just interject. Does that mean that that's your license plate we see at the beginning of the video, the Minnesota plate that says Blonde Viper?
That is, yeah, that's my plate. That's the car I just crashed.
Oh no! Well,
Things are good yet though. So
yeah, no, you can take the plates off of a crashed car, but yes, yeah. Terry and I were actually supposed to speak a few weeks ago, and I'd heard that she was in a car accident, that she was okay. The car wasn't, but the car lives on in the video, and obviously, it's like they say about an airplane landing. If you can walk away from it, it was a good one. So we're glad to hear that. So. In terms of sort of starting your career, I always like to know, obviously, what influences are, but what's some of the earliest live music either one of you remember seeing? Whether it was the kind of music that you end up making or just completely different. Do either of you have something that immediately comes to mind as, it was going to such and such a show?
Well, not to date myself, but the first concert I ever went to was an Aerosmith concert. I went there because of Aerosmith. The opening act was AC/DC, who I'd never heard of in my whole life. And wow.
And
Who's Aerosmith after that? I was totally blown away. And they've probably been my biggest influence, obviously, getting into a tribute band for them. But,
and that's, I assume that's with Bon Scott. It's again, not to date you. So now we know that this concert is before 1980. Aerosmith was the third concert I went to, but the opening act was a group of young up and comers called the Black Crowes. So this was in 1990, but it's really definitely, it's very sad for me as a huge Aerosmith fan that they wanted to do one more farewell tour. But then they realized that they couldn't. And, when I saw them in like 2011, I was like, oh, I guess that was the last time I saw them, unfortunately. What about you, Terry? What was some of the earliest music you saw, whether it was like at a concert or, just somewhere that you saw someone performing?
Well, my first concert was at the South Dakota, at the South Dakota State Fair in Sioux Falls. It was Kenny Loggins.
Nice.
And it wasn't my choice. I went with a friend and her sister. I did not ever know who he was, till that point. I still really don't. Honestly, I was. Anyway, that was my first concert.
There's people who watch my show that'll be like, oh, he's one of the guys who wrote "Your Mama Don't Dance," the Poison song.
Yeah, I mean, I knew a couple songs, but I definitely, only went, probably for the boys. I don't know, but. No, I was 80s rocker chick all the way. I had Keel and Kiss and Van Halen, and I was an 80s rocker chick for sure.
Well, speaking of 80s Kiss, I was fortunate enough over this past weekend. The wrestler Chris Jericho has this band called Quarantine with a K that they started doing this project in the pandemic, and they usually don't play live. They do 80s Kiss covers. They do new versions, and Gene and Paul have commented that they've charted with songs that never charted for them in the first place. And it's so fun to sort of relive some of those moments because, 80s Kiss is it's not really what people think about, but and, maybe some of the songs were a little suspect. Like when I walked into the concert, they were performing Let's Put the X in Sex. And I was like, well, I don't know that I needed to see it live, but that's pretty fun that they're doing it. And just to backtrack to Kenny Loggins for a moment, I mean, that is a guy that's such a huge part of the 80s because he has like 4 songs in some of the biggest movies of the 80s. I mean, Top Gun and Caddyshack alone. And there's some others that I'm not remembering. I think he did Footloose too, didn't he? So yeah, see, so every year it's like, all right, here, I'll give you a new song for a huge movie. But I feel like some of the other acts you're talking about is something that I would have been more likely to see. Yeah, I often talk about on this show how my first 3 concerts, these were all in 1990. It was Alice Cooper on the Trash Tour. Then I saw Kiss, and they had Slaughter and Little Caesar opening for them. And then the next show was the one I referenced, was Black Crowes and Aerosmith. And then that same summer, I see Whitesnake when Steve Vai was in the band. It was really like everything after that. I was like, oh, wait, concerts are always like this big and this good, right? And then you're like, oh, no, they're not. They don't always bring the big production. But 3 of those 4 were at the county fair near where I grew up in somewhat rural, suburban New York State. So
it's really interesting that, we talk about these bands that we absolutely loved growing up. And it's a really interesting fact is that Todd and I have met a lot of those bands that we listened to. We had television show that we hosted that we interviewed celebrities. And so we've interviewed Great White and Firehouse and Loverboy and Kiss. And, we've seen all these bands and, Rat, Stephen Pierce. We've interviewed all of these people that we idolized growing up. And now a lot of them are our friends today. And it's super cool.
Oh, that's always great. Yeah. I used to produce a radio show and podcast for the comedian Dennis Miller. So everyone, and he did it out of his house, but every once in a while somebody would be in LA, like doing making the rounds. So I sat in studio with Joe Elliott from Def Leppard. He's not my friend, but I got to meet him, so that was cool. And I was once one of my claim to fame, since we were talking about, not claim to fame, but I was very proud of this moment since we were talking about 80s Kiss before. We were recording a podcast in studio, Dennis, Gene Simmons, and I made him laugh. And I was just like, all right, I mean, I could go home. I don't need to ever get in front of a microphone again. And it was just some dumb joke. I said that Captain Crunch, the cereal guy, I said something about how he had stolen valor. And that just struck Gene like the funniest thing he'd heard all day. So, and see, that's the thing. When you have an interaction with somebody that you looked up to for that long, you kind of don't forget the minutia of it. So, so you're talking about the TV show that you guys used to do. So they would actually come into the studio and you'd actually get to talk to them, right?
We went to their events, and a lot of times we just did backstage in the dressing room. We would go in there, and you can actually look up the show Out and About with TNT, TNT. On YouTube, and you can find some of our old videos and interviews that we did with these bands. It's really fun to look back. Stephen Piercy and all those guys, see those interviews. Mark Slaughter, Jesse James Dupree, Jackal, all these guys. Their interviews are on there, and it's really fun. We were really funny. We had a great show, and I really miss it.
I can't watch it. You should see my hair back then. Oh God!
Wow. I think you just drove a lot of people directly to it. They were thinking about going, but now you're embarrassed by the hair, and that's like, all right, well, we have to get that. That was kind of sort of, we're talking about projects growing out of the pandemic. The way I'm talking to you right now, all of a sudden there were so many people that were like doing interviews and things this way, and I would sometimes get offered by publicists, and I'm like, do you want them to talk to my boss on that show? They're like, no, they'll do your show. So I would talk to people like Don McLean, who did American Pie, and I'm like, I don't know that he needs to waste his time talking to me, but it's fun. It's so fun to get to do those. And before that, the show really was this show that I do was really just for audio. The video component was like once in a while we do something special, but it just became the easiest way to connect with people and to record. And you can really get a lot out of that. And I'm going to check out some of these interviews that you guys are talking about, though, because if you're worried about your hair, I'm sure that some of the artists you're talking to probably have some hair moments. I mean, we were talking about 80s Kiss. We're talking about 80s Kiss for a while, and I mean, just as every once in a while you catch one of those, the hair, the outfits, especially on the Asylum tour, and you're like, man, that was a really weird moment in time.
Right.
Yeah. Everybody's like, well, we'll just dress like Bon Jovi, and it works when you look like him, less when you're somebody else. But well, I'm glad to get to talk to you both, and let's make sure everybody knows that Represent, obviously, we showed a little bit of the video, and our audio audience will get to hear it, but it's on all the streaming services, I assume, because that was attached to the press release, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, all that stuff. The digital single, as we talked about, does support the Tunnel for Towers Foundation. So obviously you've got this great song. It's out there. You got people banging their heads. What's next for Blonde Viper after this?
Well, Blonde Viper's pretty much been a studio band only, but coming next year, we want to change that, get out, do some shows, and play live, and just keep going, keep growing. We've got a third album that's been recorded for quite a while. We're waiting to get it finished, mastered, and mixed. And I'm not sure when that's going to be done, but we have another entire album ready to go. So we might release 2 in the next year. We'll see. So
Yeah, it's, I mean, I always like hearing that, bands who still record. You have, some of the artists we've talked about has said years ago that they didn't want to make any more albums, and it can be disappointing when, you like a band and you have sort of this split the middle. You have bands that put out singles, and I'm like, oh, I like that song, but what would be better? 9 more.
yeah,
So it's and yeah, but you don't want to get too carried away. You don't want to put out not everybody gets to put out 2 albums on the same day like Guns N' Roses did in
right.
1991.
Unfortunately, as a musician, your favorite song is always the one you just wrote. So you want to get it out, but you got to learn to be patient.
Yeah. And you're like, I wonder if people are going to like this in 4 years when they finally get to hear it, or whatever, the turnaround time is. So what's the best way for people to keep in touch and keep tabs on Blonde Viper? I mentioned that you have a YouTube channel.
Yep, we have a YouTube. We're on all the social medias, but Facebook is the one that we use the most. So you can look us up, just look up Blonde Viper on Facebook, and we're the ones that look like us. And then we have blondviper.com, which probably needs to be updated, but that's our website. And you can contact us through that as well. That's probably the 2 big ones.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you'll be doing some live shows next year. Who knows? Maybe you'll end up at the county fair before Kenny Loggins. Who's to say?
He's going to open for us.
I bet that there's a lot less headbanging during Kenny Loggins' set. If I just had to guess,
probably.
But a lot of songs that you'll be like, oh, I know that one. So, well, thank you both so much. And again, our audio audience will get to hear a little bit of Represent here as we wind things down, and our YouTube audience, there's like a little field like right there. Just type it in and you can watch and listen to it right now. If I was smart, I would know how to do that thing where it'll be the video loaded up after this one ends. I'm not as good at this as
no, I would have no idea.
But yeah, I know it's a thing. I would love to be able to do that. So I'm not going to promise you that I will do that, but here's what I will say. I will try. I will try to figure out how to do that for what I post.
Good deal.
Well, thank you both so much. It was great getting to chat with you. I really enjoyed the song, and I look forward to hearing more from you in 2025. And as I said, our audio audience, check out a little of Represent